Hello? Well, whatever. Okay, folks. It's that time again. You know what I'm going to say. Turn off your phones. If your phone should ring during today's class, you will be pronounced contumacious and you will lose your fief. Okay, so turn them off. You know, everything else you already know. I'm not going to go down that. Okay, advisory council nominations are open through February 21st. Nominations will be taken on paper only and may be submitted only once by each member. Nominations, forms, and collection envelopes will be in each classroom location. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. I didn't pay any attention, but it's okay. So, Wisdom Wednesday. Ollie members and guests are invited to attend from 2:30 to 4 right here on this stage. Tomorrow, the second Wisdom Wednesday, and it is called On Goats and Governors with Steve Flowers. Now, that's a really interesting name for a Wisdom Wednesday. I'm not quite sure what On Goats and Governors could be about, but maybe it's about disgraced and imprisoned governors. And coming from Illinois, when I moved here, I felt right at home. Well, you may be aware, in fact, I'm sure pretty much everybody is aware of the Lady Godiva story. Now, Lady Godiva, actually, the story takes place during the time frame we're currently studying. And Lady Godiva, as you may remember, was challenged by her husband to ride naked through town, Coventry actually, on horseback. But she had a plan. She decided that she would loosen her incredibly long hair and cover, as they would say on Monty Python, the naughty bits. Well, personally, if I could have my taxes reduced that much, I would ride naked down College myself. But the fact of the matter is, I can't grow that much hair. So, historians have come to the conclusion that indeed this is just a myth. It's a legend. It never really took place. But it has left a conundrum for sociologists because they are trying to figure out the relationship between riding a horse naked down the middle of the street in town and the consumption of chocolate. So now it is my pleasure to introduce a man who will give you the naked truth of popes and kings, Dr. Joseph Kicklighter.
Thank you, Frank. He got there fast. I didn't know. Right up till the end. You know, the whole Lady Godiva, and I did not know. Maybe there are some out there who are wittier than I and who were right there with you, but you're good, you know. Our talk today is a two-parter, which will end at the end of the term, which deals with the empire and the papacy, which I suppose is one of the classic stories of medieval history, and in large part because, of course, popes and emperors are both going to be in a position to claim ultimate authority in the world, and because following the ideal that each had, I suppose, they had reason to believe it. Let's go back to the time when there were Roman emperors and there was no yucky pope around, and so no one could challenge them. And then along came Christianity, and emperors found after Constantine that they had to say, okay, you can come too. And so this business about who's in charge here is going to be a continuing issue. It is not one that we have to go back in time with, because I'm going to start this at a time of some very famous individuals that I'm sure some people know well. Dukes of Saxony, the Ottos, yes indeed. And they will introduce our tale, and we'll go as far, perhaps to Frederick Barbarossa, but sometimes it's hard for me to control myself, so if I could lock the doors here, you people would be in a lot of trouble. Let's just say that the two factors of organized religion and wealth often have a relationship that can be both dangerous, corrupt, and yet necessary. And you say, why land? Why not the filth of lucre? Well, we just don't have much of that. Yeah, believe me, if they could have, they would have gotten it. But instead, the matter is land. And what it means is that the church can't maintain itself, at least in terms of all the causes that it undertakes, without the land. Now, if you want to say, as some people do, and we know about Franciscans and other people like that, say, well, we just want to live in happiness and joy and love Jesus. That's fine. That's great. But if you've got bills to pay, I don't think that's going to work too well for you. It's to understand when people ask me about how did the church get so involved in the lands and all the rest of it, it's because, like all of us, it does have to pay for expenses. Unfortunately, individuals who come into positions of authority, both high and low, will succumb to temptations to take advantage of this situation. And this again is to say, and people ask me this, it's not that there aren't many good Christians in the medieval period, it's just that we never hear about them. It's a lot of the ones I'm going to talk about. Isn't that the truth? I mean, you have this great cadre of the venerable and the sanctified, but not a word. We want to hear about the others. The ones who are, shall we say, absorbed by the power and, of course, the filth of lucre. Now, we know that as time goes on, in any period, many practices or customs may go on, and people have a nagging feeling that they're not exactly what people ought to be doing, but they just accept them because it's the way things have been done. You know that feeling? It's just customary. That's just the way we do things around here. You don't like it, you can just leave, go somewhere else. This is just our way. All of that. And here are three customs that grew up certainly by this period that we're calling the High or the Central Middle Ages, that everybody, I think, had a gnawing feeling, you know, maybe we ought not to be doing this, but hey, it's just the way it's done. One is called simony, and that, of course, is a biblical term from Simon, who tried to buy the power of the Holy Spirit. You remember him from the Acts of the Apostle. Now, I don't go around saying to people, you're a simoniac. I think that could be hurtful. Okay, so I've never known any simoniacs personally, but I know if maybe I could, I could find some, I suspect, if I looked real hard. But basically, they have their, everybody has a justification. And Simoniacs will say, well, Daddy wanted me to be a bishop. And so, all these lands come with the bishopric. So the last bishop's family, we had to kind of grease the palms. You say, but that isn't in the Bible, is it? No. Well, there you have some. I mean, it's just people being people, I guess. It just means that once you become bishop, there are certain fees. Call this an installation charge. But those lands are valuable, and it is the custom. Investiture means that church positions have been, if you'll forgive the term, feudalized. Meaning that church positions now follow German tradition. And that German tradition is for the new bishop to bow before the Lord. I know. And accept the symbols of the bishop's authority from a layman's hands. Those filthy paws. Yes. Because layman. And he does that. He said, that's called lay investiture. I'm going to invest you as bishop. And you say, should they be doing that? I mean, I can see in your look the anxiety, concern. I know, I'm the same way. Yeah, I need counseling after giving the lecture. I mean, it's just, you think, it's not right. Something inside tells you that. But I mean, everybody did it. And you become one of the king's men. You say, should I be one of the king's men? Oh, I don't know. You better think. Yeah, but I want to be a bishop. Well, then you have to do investiture by the Lord. Because the Lord, you're going to be the vassal. So you have, like, Lord and Lord. That is difficult. And finally, a question I suppose the Catholic Church is still wrestling with. Clerical marriage. Oh, yes. You say, I thought we'd settle that. No, not really. We're still working on it. It'd be just easier if everybody said, we just would rather maintain chastity and let it go at that. But it just doesn't work that way. Many of the lower clergy were, for whatever reason, involved with someone. Was their wedding? I don't think so, if you want to say concubinage, but it was commonly accepted. I don't think there were pickets outside the priest's house saying, down with married clergy or chastity above all. I don't think that was a problem among the laity. It will be a problem later on because you know what? They're living together and then going to come Junior and Sis. It's just biology. I didn't make the rules. Yep. And so what does this mean? Daddy's going to want Junior to get that church. Son, someday all this will be yours. You know, that kind of thing. Look at that altar, man. That's yours. He said, oh, gee, Dad, you mean me? Oh, yeah. It's amazing to think about, but that is true, that they worried about the most ordinary church positions being passed down father to son. And while this was commonly accepted in many parts of Western Catholicism, sure it was too in the Orthodox Church, where there were never any no-nos still aren't. It's just a matter in the Orthodox Church about you can't rise to the highest ranks. But in the Catholic Church, as I say, I think they're still in a quandary about this particular issue. In any event, on we go to the rulers of that day, and these are the great Ottonian emperors. Whatever happened to Charlemagne's beautiful empire? As we say to the children, it went bye-bye, didn't it? It split up. It was a nice idea. We'll never forget Christmas Day of 800. You're on the... Oh, that's -1. You can still make an A. But you just lost a point. I'm sorry. I warned you this could happen. I should have reviewed. Christmas Day 800, the coronation of Charlemagne by... Whoa! Yes! Leo the Third. I mean, he's not top 10 popes, and yet he was known. I'm very impressed. See? We have examples there. Follow the good examples, and we'll drill. We can drill quite many centuries. You want to cover several, I'm sure. But that was a long time ago by the time of the Ottonians. The Carolingians die out in the course, as we've already seen, in the 900s, the 9th century, I should say. And these particular German kings gained the title during the 10th century, 900s. They're elected. It's like the dukes get together, the rulers, and I guess they say, is everybody for me? You know, but it's a very odd situation to think about these prima donnas getting together, and one of them is chosen king, and I guess you have to promise, I'll be nice, I won't be bossy, and we're going to fight a lot of people and win and kick some you know what, and it's going to be great. And so this particular family, these Saxon dukes, will become the rulers. Otto the First is the second of these rulers, German kings. He doesn't give up Saxony. Now, he keeps there. I'm just king. And then, of course, you bring all the other people. You know, you're talking about the Ollie Council, and I think the Witan and other advisory bodies in medieval times. And it's that same thing, and you got to be respectful. And so you don't just because you're king, it doesn't mean you can. Those dukes are going to go, oh, you know, they got feelings. They can get very sensitive because they like to be bossy too. So he's got to be very careful and give them a share of the booty and all that. Make sure everybody gets something. And it's very interesting, these kinds of relationships. And you see the area. In the olden times, we would have called it the eastern part of the Carolingian Empire, wouldn't we? And keep on going eastward, meaning the limits of what would have been the Western Catholic world, I dare say. Not completely, but much of it. And meanwhile, the Ottos, like rulers before them, would find family members who could assist them in governing. And you say, is that right? Is that ethical? Well, they thought so. They thought that this would make for a better regime. And of course, this meant that they were giving them often church positions. And I know this will shock those of you who are Alabamians. Sometimes the filth of nepotism. Yeah, I know. You pure people, I hate to even bring it, the word would shock you, but after I've often talked about simoniacs, I guess nepotist won't offend you. I mean, it's horrible, but they do it, and they bring in all kinds of, y'all come, we've got something for you too, and this will often be church positions. Otto, known to history as Otto the Great, and he will be followed by his son Otto II and his grandson Otto III, but this is the big shot. This is the number one figure in the family, is known for his defeat of Hungarians, the effect being the settling of the Hungarians, Magyars, into what is Hungary today. And as I always like to point out to classes, that then they settle down and they get baptized and they start farming. And it may not be quite as exciting as their ancestors, looting and pillaging. Those were good times. And farming and going to mass may not seem great, but that would be the future of these Hungarians. He was successful there, and he was successful in a variety of areas. And of course, it all leads to his being crowned emperor. He goes to Rome to do it to a rather young pope of the day, a Pope John. And you might say, why didn't he just get a local clergyman to do the coronation? Well, it's that Leo III, December 25th, 800. Yes, over and over. Yeah, yeah. Remember, this can be painful. Yeah, but during the break you can go over that. So the idea is, can you really do it on your own? You know, emperor, do-it-yourself kit. You know, have some sort of local German clergyman and just call him up and have him come over and crown you? No, it won't work. So they've got that kind of, they're very big on traditions. So you got to go to Rome. So Otto I then is made emperor. Luckily for Otto, the Pope at that time, the popes of that day, were weak and basically looking to people like Otto to control their enemies, of which there were multitudes. And enemies of what kind? Well, mostly they were of other Roman families. There's a book about this, came out many years ago, called The Bad Popes. And it's basically about the popes of this period. And by and large, this is a crude word to use, but they're kind of losers. I mean, they are people like, they get to be pope because their mother or their father, or the family traditions, and they say, my kid's better than your kid, he's going to be pope. And that's, of course, these are Romans, so they're local talent there. And they are fighting about this. Leo III had come from such a family, and he had his troubles. That's what brought Charlemagne down there to straighten things out. Remember? I hope you remember. That Leo III, yes, Frank has pointed out that he lost, he had optical issues as a result of the problem. They took his eyes out. Yeah. Oh, and tongue removal, that was my scissor. You got my scissor. Okay, so, and you say, but they came back. Yes, they did. That was taken care of. All of this is to say that this is not a pleasant time to be pope. Pope one day and gone somewhere else the next. So there are many popes. I would hate to try to memorize all of them. I can do the President of the United States. I know, I'm shocked. I know it's horrible. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. You'll give me a bad evaluation for this once you find out that I don't know all the popes. But I know a lot, okay? But anyway, it was true that I think the Pope who crowned him he would overthrow him in a few years. He was probably about 20, 25 years old. No, he was not. He was involved in various political activities that Otto didn't approve of. And you say, is that really the business of an emperor to tell the Pope what to do? Well, that's the problem. The situation you're dealing with. Now, his grandson fascinates me because he ruled in the year 1000 for one thing. Remember how we carried on in 2000? Well, I'm wondering, they probably had big parties, you know, at 999 and thought, wow, man, it's going to be a great year. He was, in fact, just a teenager himself. His mother was Byzantine. And you think, what's a nice Byzantine princess doing with a bunch of Germans? Well, that's politics. I imagine her daddy came to her and said, oh, honey, we've got an exciting arrangement for you. I hope you've updated your subscription to Bride's Magazine because you're going to live in this exciting Western place called Germany. And I'm thinking if you lived in Constantinople, the idea of moving to Germany might not be so appealing. But anything for the family. So Theophano becomes the daughter-in-law of Otto I, the wife of Otto II, and she will basically stand in when Otto II is killed in battle and supervise her son, who is a teen, and he will become ruler in the late 990s with his mother. And he probably, took, because she had a full staff, probably took Greek 101. You know what I mean? Yeah. Have you ever thought about that? Alpha and Omega, man. We're not just doing the Latin or the German. We're doing Greek. So it's a fascinating little phase in Ottonian history, I must say. But what fascinates me more is the fact that he sort of assisted one of his tutors. There's always help for teachers. He made one of his teachers Pope. Yeah, I have dreams. So that person who is the first French Pope, and that's something you can drop at a party. You want to know who the first French Pope was? People will surround you. Can you imagine the attention you'll draw? His name was Gerbert. And they called him, oh, you'll love this, Gerbert. Students will say, is that Gerbert? And I said, no. Let's try. Aurillac, A-R-A-U-R-I-L-L-A-C. Yeah. He will take the title Sylvester II because there had been a Sylvester I. And according to the tales, Sylvester I had been Pope under Constantine, and so I think he thought the name was symbolic. You know, most popes choose names that have some sort of symbolism, significance for them. So, in fact, Pope Sylvester II, who was a logician, mathematician, used the abacus, had traveled in Muslim Spain, studying with Spanish mathematicians. It's amazing, fascinating guy. But he and Otto III, with Mama in the background, basically were in this very warm relationship of former teacher, former student, and now Pope Emperor, and you say, well, this is just all very warm and cozy. Yes, it is, but these things can't last. Okay, we just have an exception here, and I always enjoy sharing that exception, you know, 999, 1,000, and we were all sort of hugging, and Pope and Emperor. But these things, of course, can't last. And part of this, as we are going to see, of course, will be the passage of time. Not in medieval sense a lot of time, but this dynasty will die out. Otto III has no issue, and he's succeeded by a cousin who has no issue, so that's the end of the line. And the Dukes of Swabia will now become kings, and here we have a fellow named Henry III. There are lots of Henrys, so if you take a medieval course, be prepared for that. That when you have to do identifications and you have to learn all the different Henrys and so forth. And they're all very different. Because Henry III was so devout and so concerned about the best interests of the church, I think he made the popes a little jealous. Because he was very much the pious layman, very, very devoted. And so he goes to Rome to pay tribute, and you know, news hadn't gotten around. And there was a terrible situation. 3 different men claimed to be pope. Yes. And you say, how could that be? Well, one group gets together and says, you're going to be the new Bishop of Rome. Oh, thanks. I want to do a good job for you all. I appreciate the election. And then over here, a group, you know, and they're saying, we didn't like him. We're going to put in a better person as pope. And then somebody will bring out the filth of lucre and say, I want to clean it up. So let me get a whole group here and you can be pope. So by the years that would follow, you will have 3 individuals who now claim to be pope. And one of them, I think he meant well. I mean, he really did. Apparently, he tried to buy the papacy to clean it up. You know, because he knew it was a bad situation. It was kind of like, now once I buy it, then I can straighten everything out. He had the right intentions, but he used a bad method. I don't care. I mean, you don't want to go around people screaming, Simoniac. You know, yes. But I mean, yeah, words like that can hurt, so I'm sure. But you have three of them. And all Henry III wants is to get crowned emperor. And so he's probably going, these crazy Italians, what am I going to do? I want the real pope. And will the real pope please stand up? You know, it's like, I got to get a real pope. And this is a famous event in 1046, the Synod of Sutri, which is a suburb outside Rome. And they were there, and church tradition says that basically the 3 were sort of said, we appreciate your efforts, and we know the Lord blesses and keeps you, and we have a golden parachute that's waiting for you outside. So don't call us, we'll call you. So they are basically out, and a new pope will be chosen. The significance of Clement is merely that he will crown Henry III emperor. What is more significant is that shortly thereafter, Clement departs this life, and he will be succeeded by a nice German who happens to be the cousin of Henry III. You're going, oh my gosh, you mean? Yes. Thanksgiving, Christmas, the whole family would get together. But he, like Henry III, was devout and devoted to church reform. In other words, their unease about simony and lay investiture and all the rest became very serious under these two, Henry III and Leo IX. The reason I mention them together is it sort of takes both of them, and stories are told at Leo IX, like the Pope today will travel around and visit. Now, when you're Pope in the 11th century, you can't go to all the interesting places like the Emirates or Latin America, but for a Pope in the 11th century, he went to various places in France. And what he would do is more or less speak in front of councils of bishops. And maybe they would have a prayer, and then maybe he would give a meditation, and then those kinds of things that clergy do. Then he would stand up and he'd say, I want anyone who became bishop who is a simoniac to stand up now and confess. And you're going, uh-oh, he knows. They said that popes would, some of these bishops would go into quivers and tremors. Yeah. It's like you catch your children doing stuff. Yeah. So, Leo IX was quite the man. What I think is significant here, though, is a recognition of these particular acts as not being able to be satisfied through, oh, well, that's just the way things are. Let's not get upset. Yes, we are upset, and we're going to do something about it. It's that's where the attitude is changing in this 11th century. Unfortunately, Henry III will die while he's still young. I'm not even sure. I guess he made it to 40, but barely. And leaving a young child as the new German king. A young child who will become infamous in both German and papal history. Henry IV. If you read in books, Henry IV, emperor, you'll know it's wrong. He was never crowned, at least legitimately. But very importantly to understand that for years, Henry IV will be just a child, and the regime will be run by his advisors, in Germany. And this will be in Rome a wonderful time. And there's a reason for that, because now there's no emperor to tell him what to do. That's right. While he is a boy, and they're going to, send him nice little letters and maybe a little present, some toys or something. Oh, you're going to be a big boy. You're so cute. That kind of thing. But what they are trying to do is get the popes, the papacy, into a position that they will not have to be humble in front of a king anymore. Yeah. While he's still a little tyke. Because they grow up. Yes, they do. And they get big and mean. And so the idea is, from the establishment of this College of Cardinals, and this is the time when it is set up clearly with a constitution which allows the cardinal bishops, and that's why all the cardinals, I don't care if he's in Chicago or New Orleans or elsewhere, each of them will have a titular church in Rome, because they are supposed to be the sort of the Ollie Board of Advisors. They are the advisors, these cardinals. People wonder about these cardinals, but that's what they do, and this is the time they are set up. And the idea is that in the future, like Nicholas II would want, no pope would be chosen because he was the teacher of the emperor, or he's just some, cousin who comes to reunions. We want it to be an election of the best person. And you know what I mean by best person? Independent, who tell the emperors what's what when they need to be told. That is the idea. Because, every day, the little boy, little Henry, he's getting bigger and beginning to work out, and you say, gosh, little Hanky is getting to be grown up, riding, learning, all those, taking German courses, so he's maybe taking a little Latin, who knows? So Henry IV then is getting ready to assume authority. And you say, could there be a fly in the ointment? Yes, a big one. He's a Roman named Ildebrando, or as we would say, Hildebrand. He has been quiet under Nicholas II. Not that quiet, but he more or less has a lot of say-so in the papal bureaucracy, such as it was. And when the time was right, they knew that this kind of individual could assume a lot of authority. He was known by Romans, said he was a Roman. It's even rumored he was a Jewish convert to Catholicism, if you can believe that. But whatever, he was chosen pope, and later some would say he was illegitimate. Not illegitimately born, but illegitimately made pope. Why? Because the cardinals were supposed to choose the new pope, and it was said that at the funeral of the last pope, that the crowds would get so excited when Ildebrando walked in that everybody just accepted. He said, oh, I didn't, okay. That kind of thing. And nobody says a peep until later. And yes, and then it'll get ugly. So that is the theory, that he just assumed everybody wanted him. And there were probably some others in the room who said, hey, I don't like you. You shouldn't be pope. I should have gotten it. There are people like that. So they store up this resentment. But keep that in mind. But it's fair to say the guy who will be known as Gregory VII, but who's really known in history as Hildebrand, tends to be one of the most controversial fellows. It takes him till the 17th century to be chosen saint. That's a long campaign, folks. That's a long campaign. Man, working those election crowds for 700 years. He must have made somebody mad. Well, look at him. I wouldn't say he was there to, oh, I love you, give me a hug. No, no, no. He is hard blank. He is going to tell people what's what, and he is determined to do some kicking if they thinks they need it. And this is the famous, infamous Gregory VII. The words brusque and assertive hardly do justice to his personality, but basically he is there as the new pope, and Henry IV is now a grown man. And I'm sure Henry IV sent a nice congratulatory letter and said, oh, we're so excited. We heard about your election. We want to wish you all the best. You know how they send the courtesy notes. And I'm sure it was very nice. I don't suspect because I've actually read it. I mean, these in collections of documents, you always see these formal little letters at the beginning. And then things get cold, not warm. Because you know what happens after those first notes? Then they get down to issues that they disagree on. And one of them is going to be the issue of lay investiture, which kings, whether it be England, whether it's France, whether it's Germany, whatever it may be, is going to infuriate people like kings when the Pope said, you can't do that anymore. Well, my daddy did it. Why can't I do it? Well, because that was wrong then, it's wrong now. So it's got to stop. Or else. You telling me? You know, that kind of thing. Because Henry IV was probably very, very, I hate to say arrogant, but let's just say he had been brought up saying, I'm the king, emperor to be, and you can't treat me that way. I don't care whether you are Pope. And you say, is this some sort of German and Italian thing? I don't know. It's not nationalism, maybe ethnic, but whatever it is, this becomes almost the war of the Middle Ages. One of the most famous of fights. This is an illustration of Henry IV, and you will notice, you can read at the top, Henricus Cordus right up there at the top, that this is the way that he would like to be portrayed. And we see this as a figure, and some of you will know this from the Bible, a Melchizedek figure, king and priest. And the Pope's got news for him. No, you're not. Because I'm on top and you're not. Gregory essentially orders that lay investiture stop. And so the king says, you know, they don't live together. I mean, you know, there's a lot of communiques back and forth. But with Gregory, see, unlike previous popes, there's none of this. Well, we can work this out. I want to be your friend. I love you. Jesus and I love you both. So, and Gregory says, no, you are wrong and I'm right. I mean, God is right. So, I mean, it's that idea, and that's where I think this whole issue, when the abolition of lay investiture, which German kings found to be so important to them. So, when Henry refused the Pope's orders, he said, okay, let's try this out and see how you'll like it. Excommunication. You can't even receive the sacrament. And then the big D, deposition. You're not even going to be a king anymore. You're just a loser. And if you die, there's a certain fire I want to introduce you to. Yeah, you are going to hell in a handbasket. And you won't even go in the special king section either. You'll be in the loser section of hell. And we will pick it up there when we return. 5 minutes? Okay, they have 4.5 minutes now. All right. Class is beginning.
Okay.
All right. You better.
But it's my social life. I don't get out much.
You're such a socialite, but think of him. Think of the suffering of Henry IV. He's been damned.
I know what it feels like for your feet.
Okay. He would just, okay. It's tough to be short. Yes, I get it. I get it. So that was Henry IV. And he's going like, I guess Gregory VII and I have got problems. So I wonder what we can do about this. Well, you've got a choice. You can get down and beg for forgiveness. And we're going to try that. It's up in northern Italy, and this is I wouldn't say this particular depiction of the event is particularly impressive, but it gives you the idea. The Pope was going up to Germany on a slow trip through the mountains in the cold weather, not the best conditions for a trip. He stopped, one of his supporters stopped at her castle, stayed there, and so the ex-king, remember, deposed, can't receive the sacrament. He will arrange to have an encounter with the Pope. This place is called Canossa. It was actually used as an expression by no one less than Otto von Bismarck when he had a fight with the Catholic Church in the 19th century. And he would say, because I wasn't there, but I wish I had been. He must have said to one of his advisors when there was, because he was a Lutheran, and you know, they were not crazy about the Roman Catholics. He said, I will not go to Canossa, because that means I will subject myself to the authority of the Pope. And of course, Bismarck is not going to subject himself to anybody. So, this means, in effect, that according to the tale, for 3 days, Henry and his advisors maintained themselves in the cold. I'm sure they must have gotten some soup or some relief. Because I've often thought about that, you know, and thought, I don't really think they could manage. But somehow, the days went on, and people in the castle, because of course the Pope's one of the guests, so you know it's like a big party, and there are lots of people there. They probably would say, Your Holiness, do you know who's outside? He's so sad. He's wearing the clothing of a penitent. He loves you. See? I mean, it's like you put your dog outside and he does a little boo-boo. And then, I mean, it's that sort of thing. And the Pope's going like, yeah, I bet he's sorry. Because where is the Pope going? Why is he in northern Italy? He's going to Germany to help with the election of a new king. So, what is Henry going to do? Well, he keeps begging, and finally, I guess with all the people at the party, Gregory says, okay, he can come in. And now you understand why he didn't get sainthood until the 17th century. He wasn't exactly the most forgiving soul, but he allowed him to come in, and he said, okay, I'll let you have the bread and wine of the communion. He said, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. All of that. He said, but you still got a long way to go, and I'm going to be watching. And I'm sure then Henry gets on his horse with an Auf Wiedersehen. He's back north. I'm out of here. You can go back to Rome. See ya. People often say, maybe this was a victory for the king, not for the Pope. If you stop and think about it, if the Pope had not backed down, and he told all these people, I'm sorry, you'll just have to stay out in the snow, I'm not going to talk to him. But by giving in, it allowed Henry to say, nah, it's all over. I'm the king, I'm going to have my lay investiture, and that is that. Of course, it's not over. They will begin another round of fighting. There will be an anti-king set up against Henry. And Gregory's enemies will set up, yes, an anti-pope. You say, what is an anti-pope? Well, he's someone that the Catholic Church doesn't recognize, but in his day, various individuals acknowledged him as popes. But it's sort of like the brand X of the popes. It means you don't get credit, okay? You know, like when your permanent record, you know, nobody's going to say, oh, you were pope. Oh, you were an anti-pope. Okay, yeah. So you're not a winner. Clement III had been he had lovely credentials. He had been Archbishop of Ravenna. I love Ravenna. Ravenna's a nice city there in Italy, if you've been. So his credentials were lovely, but it just happened there was already a pope. But there was an anti-Gregory faction, and some of them were saying, as you remember, there was always something funny about the way he was chosen pope. You know? He's probably illegal. And the Archbishop of Ravenna says, okay, what do you think we ought to do? You should be the true pope. Me? Okay. So he will be made Clement III. And Henry's going to say, I think I love you. You really are the pope. So that is so funny to me how they then will take over Rome with a military force. Gregory loses control, obviously. I don't think the city's big enough for both of them. And Easter Day of 1084, Gregory, who will actually be in a little fortress right outside Rome, will have to watch as this anti-pope will make Henry emperor. I'm sure he did so under protection, because I'm sure they didn't invite him to the coronation. It didn't say, wow. No. So he had to stay far away, but he had to watch, it was said. He died the following year, but I think the final tragedy for him was having to observe this anti-pope, and I'm sure he said, you're going to hell pronto. Clement III, and you know, they used to be old pals, probably in seminary, taking Bible classes together, you don't know. And so now he becomes so-called pope, and he will crown Henry IV emperor. But if you are in a social situation and someone starts calling Henry IV emperor, remember, coronation by an antipope, did it take? I don't think so. It's not a good coronation, bad coronation. But that's interesting. I mean, you will have anti-popes, anti-emperors, so far as that goes. What will become of Gregory VII? Nothing good. He's going to go south, which under ordinary circumstances would be very nice. Salerno, down south. Yeah, Naples, it's way down there. And it's very nice. It's just that the Normans who rule that area and are his protectors tend to be a little stifling for a man who thinks he's in control. 1084, 1085, I'm sure he's telling them, we need to get Rome. We need to go do that. Yeah, we'll see about that. You just get back to your Bible readings. You know, I don't think you've covered all of St. Paul's letters. If you finish, let's do the epistles. That kind of thing, because he's ready for some action. And it never occurs because, as you see, Gregory Meritur dies. He will die, and he will say on his deathbed, I have loved justice and hated iniquity. Therefore, I die in exile. So he had done well in Bible class because he could quote Scripture. Gregory VII, in other words, seems to die a disaster and even a failure. Henry IV has become emperor. We just go on with our lay investiture. But I don't know, somewhere in heaven or purgatory, wherever Gregory VII is, he would have the last laugh. Because in fact, Henry IV's son would rebel against him, and he in fact would end the whole business of investiture. Yeah. After the old man died and he became ruler, the Pope would crown Henry V emperor. Because I think both were ready for a settlement. And I always like to say a settlement doesn't mean we've come to love each other. We want to spend a long weekend in Rome together. It's nothing like that. It's just we're going to have an agreement. A copy of that agreement, I thought it was interesting, is still preserved in Rome. And this particular alliance, this Concordat of Rome, would in fact end the investiture of German bishops by a king. And they agree. I, Henry, promise that I will do this and not do that. It doesn't say, I, Henry, promise I will love you, Pope, and I'll do everything you say before you can get it out of your mouth. No, 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 no. This is a concordat. It is an agreement between the two that's full of nice words, but we understand it for what it is. An agreement because this fellow named Calixtus knew there was no sense in following any kind of path that Gregory had followed. That is to say, lay investiture of new bishops, or abbots for that matter, abbots of monasteries. That's over. It's a non-issue from now on. And let me tell you something. Simply because it ends it doesn't mean that kings can't choose the bishops. Because when the bishops are nominated, the king's representatives will sit down with the nominee and say, you know, the king really likes you. He thinks you're really sharp. But we need to have some understanding. And you say, this sounds cheap and dirty and political. Yeah. And he would be the only candidate. That was nice, too. So, I think you can assume that they're not like all these interviews. Candidates are coming in from all over Europe. They're looking over all these different CVs, files. No, I think it's pretty clear there were other ways that kings could decide who controlled these valuable positions. Ecclesiastical vassals, as I call them here. Now, after this investiture conflict, and we look again here, Central Europe, 1180, we're in the 12th century, we do appreciate the fact that the empire is expanding. You see Poland over there in the top, you see some of Prussia, yeah, some of East Prussia. The lands are beginning to look, I think, more and more familiar to those of you who may know the history, imperial history, German history in these early centuries. And one of the people who really helps put the Germans on the map, of course, is going to be Frederick. Once again, we have a situation of families die out. Now that both men and women can become heirs to thrones, we won't have that problem anymore. But I suppose in 1125 that wasn't a consideration. So Henry V died without a son, and some of you scholars will remember that Henry V had been married to the daughter of the English king, Henry II, and she got shipped back home, the famous Matilda. More of that later. In any event, after that, a new family would come about. But boy, was it a problem. And here we have an example of what happens when you have an elective monarchy. We have everybody fighting. And we will have two sides, and lovers of Dante's Divine Comedy will be very familiar with this, because the struggle between the one family and the other family goes on and on and on. Swabia and Saxony, Guelphs and Ghibellines, two groups splitting up the Germans to determine which way Germany would go, who would become ruler, and whether whichever family got it, they could persuade the others, now we love you and we want to work with you and let's be friends. We all understand differences and disagreements, and these people had it very seriously. And it went on, gosh, for decades before there will emerge through marriage one family's daughter and one family's son will emerge with him, the great one. Barbarossa, Redbeard. Not so red anymore, but it was in his youth. Frederick, Duke of Swabia, and his wife was a Saxon. So this was their idea of dealing with problems. He would still have to deal with his brother-in-law, who was Duke of Saxony. That can get ugly. But I'm sure at the wedding and at the reception, they all had toasts and hugs, and and all of that. And everybody's wishing all the best until they can get back home and start, well, we attack him, that kind of thing. But again, that's how they arranged this, by Barbarossa basically saying, I want to work with your family. That's talking to his wife. And saying, I want to work with your family. I love my in-laws. They're great people. Your daddy was a mighty fine man. And all of that. Right. Sure. So, Barbarossa. And what policies will he fill? Well, he's going to fill more or less a policy of bringing these Germans together and trying to make them more agreeable with each other. Because not only does he want to rule Germany, but like many of the Germans of the Middle Ages, he also wants Italy. Maybe it's like we just can't get too much. Ever since Charlemagne went down for the coronation on December 25th, 800. Leo. Yeah. Just checking. Just checking. Whew. You didn't let me down. Leo III. We understand they haven't gotten over it. Every time, you see. I mean, what did Henry IV did? He really cut up, didn't he? Go down there, and poor Pope had to go into exile and get snitched down to Salerno. I mean, it's like the Germans want to get into Italy. And Barbarossa is going to be no different. But how do we get the Saxons to be cooperative? Our in-laws. Remember that? I mean, this is the thing. Because people need some military activity. That's their purpose. That is what they're there. And Barbarossa is going to say to him what many of us will understand. You can keep whatever fiefs, royal fiefs, are in your lands that your ancestors had seized. I won't try to claim them again. They're yours now. You just promise that I'm your Lord and you'll be my vassal. Well, that's just more or less a formality. But he will also say, you know what you need to be doing, you folks, you Saxons, going east? There are a lot of heathens. And they are heathens. I mean, they're not even reading the Bible. They're not even thinking about, I can't wait, my first confirmation class is next week. They're not doing any of that. These are hard, cold pagans. I remember, how do you think these Saxons became Christian in the first place? I'll tell you why. Charlemagne went and got them. Yeah. He said, you folks need to be baptized. They said, no, we don't. We don't want. We love these statues. We love these trees, whatever it is. But they were made to convert. There's a lot of military force involved in Christian conversion during the medieval period. So the policy of going to the east, the Germanic move, is clearly one of religious and military determinism. And for the vassals of Frederick Barbarossa, we will find that move very important because this will expand German lands in the east. And of course, Poland is still a very Catholic country. So that is the result, in case you are curious. I mean, all of those territories become Catholic, not Orthodox, thanks to these particular moves. There he is as the Christian ruler, and as a Christian ruler and German king, he wants to be Roman emperor. His relations, thanks to his attempts to control Italy, are not good with the Pope of the day. And the Pope of the day, again, this is the kind of thing that makes you the star at a social event. Just ask, does anyone besides me know who is the only English Pope? English Pope. Yeah, he's French. You've already won the first crowd over, but this is the next crowd. We heard about you and the way you remembered the date of the coronation. But do you know the only English Pope? You'll say, Nicholas Breakspear. So you'll get it right. Nicholas Breakspear. Doesn't that sound well? He was some poor little peasant boy, and he climbed the ranks, and he became Pope Adrian IV. And he got to be right sassy when he had to deal with Barbarossa. Because I would be, Barbarossa was not somebody to mess with. But Barbarossa brought all of his troops. You know, he kept keeping the Saxons. Y'all keep going east. Have a nice trip. You know, y'all stay busy. Yeah, let's go. And so he doing this Italy thing, because Italy is where the money is, where the people are, the cities, and it's very interesting. But he gets down there to Rome. The Pope, the only English Pope, Nicholas Breakspere, Pope Adrian IV, will crown him emperor. And you think, well, I'm sure he said Donka, and it was just lovely, and well, for a little while. The problem is that Barbarossa, see all those cities up there? I'm sure some of you have been up there. Oh, you've been there? Oh, Milan and all those places up there. See how nice that is? And you say, gosh, all the little dots of people? Yes, and lots of them. This is where you want to be if you want to be urban, medieval urban. Those little towns / cities in northern Italy. Frederick wanted to control them, see, all the way down there to Bologna. But because of his financial and military demands, the cities organized a mercenary force against him. They called themselves the Lombard League. Got another date for you. 1176. And the Battle of Legnano, way up there, you see where the little crosses are? Can you see that? Right there. See, that's way up there. What's across the border? Switzerland, would you think? Yeah. But it's real pretty up there, if I do say so myself. But right there, the Germans got beat by the army of the Lombard League. And you can imagine how embarrassing that is for the Germans under Frederick Barbarossa to lose to like an army of what? The Rotary Club, the Chamber of Commerce? I mean, you're thinking, God, what has happened to us? This is embarrassing. We thought, you know, we would be in control of northern Italy, and instead, he's defeated. And you know what he does? He says, I'm so sorry. This was a terrible error. And I want to say, I love you, Holy Father. Here is a painting. I'll go back. But this is a 19th century. There is Frederick. You say, oh, is he choosing some new slippers? No. No. Nor is he talking to Dr. Scholl. He is definitely, we call it submission with a capital S. And guess where they are? Venice. St. Mark, some of you all have been there too. That is the depiction there that, and you know, these things, you say, I wonder if they were sincere. Oh, I kind of doubt it. I think it was, though, a real good show. This is another particular depiction of those events there at St. Mark's. Venice was always thought of as being a kind of a neutral town. And as such, I'm sure the Venetians could care less who won. I mean, they could go, you know, Pope, Emperor, whatever. You know, we're out there making money, international trade, we're a big deal. So this was a perfect place for the two of them to meet. But this was a time for the Pope to be happy, because it seemed, I have won, I'm in control here. And he was, to a certain extent. It didn't mean that the North Italian cities, who had gotten papal support, were prepared now to succumb to the Germans. They anticipated, of course, that Frederick would still have demands on them, because the Germans planned to keep their interests in northern Italy. And you know, popes and emperors are going to go with each other in continuing conflicts and combats. That won't change. And as for Frederick, a very sad end. To be really cruel, a funny thing happened to him on the way to the crusade. He drowned. Yeah, so teach you not to cross rivers on the way to crusades. And so that will be the end of the story of Barbarossa. England and France next time, and thank you for your attention. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. Am I pretty close on time? I didn't mean to keep
I waved at you. You were
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I didn't want to.
We went over last time.
No, did I?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, no. You're not going to, am I going to have to explain myself to the Ollie official?
No, you won't. The Ollie police
Give them a break.
The Supreme Council. No, we go ahead that break.
Yeah, I know.
4.5 minutes.
She's on the console, just so you know.
Lombard, 1170.
December 25th. What year?
800.
800. Okay. All right.
So why I don't understand why the Frederick thought he had to, quote, submit to the Pope.
Because the Pope was involved with that Lombard League, and more or less, it was so embarrassing to Frederick, since the Pope had supported the Lombard League and the Lombard League beat him,
Yeah.
he had to more or less apologize to
But couldn't he just take his morals and go home, you know, more